everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloney, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership for TEPSA. And each week, I look to bring you a different guest who has inspired, encouraged, or challenged me in one way or another. I am thrilled this week to bring you my good friend, Evan Robb. Evan, thanks for being here. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Todd, I am really excited to be here. I watch this show every time that you put it up on your Facebook page. The show's really exciting, so I appreciate you having me on as a guest. And I would like to say that you and I have been connected for several years now. And man, I really appreciate our connection and everything that I learned from you. You're a source of inspiration for me. So my name is Evan Robb. I'm a middle school principal. And I think a couple things that are unusual about me is I am completing my 20th year as a school principal, which is a little bit unusual this day and age. But I love it. I'm a principal in Berryville, Virginia, middle school, about 480 kids, fantastic staff, great kids, great community, and absolutely love what I'm doing. And an interesting factoid is I actually began my teaching career in the same school that I'm currently a principal, although I didn't go straight through. I started my teaching career, left for a few years, and then was able to come back to the building as a principal.
That's still so cool. I didn't even know that. That's awesome. And even though you weren't there the whole time, that's neat to kind of have those two as the end caps right now of your career. So, thinking about, you growing up as a kid, was education always in your blood?
Great question. I think it was always in my blood. I know my mother, and, my mother is a lifelong educator. My father was a college professor. He passed away in 2012, but I grew up in a family of educators, and I think I spent a lot of my life when I was growing up trying to push away from that. And it's probably not unusual. I mean, probably a lot of kids who grow up in families with educators or whether, parents are doctors or lawyers, you kind of grow up and kind of push a little bit away from that. So I went through college, got a master's degree in business administration, an MBA with a focus in finance, and then realized, I think somewhat to my parents' chagrin, that I wanted to actually be a teacher. So I diverted from a career in business and went back and got my teaching endorsement and began teaching. And fortunately, no regrets ever since.
So where did you start teaching? Like what grade levels?
I started teaching in, wow, you're going to really work my brain here, but I got it. I started teaching in 7th grade as a history teacher and a language arts teacher. And over the course of my teaching, I taught 6th grade language arts and 6th grade history, and I taught 8th grade civics. And had an opportunity to be a team leader in a middle school and also to be an English department chair. And then went back and got my administrative endorsement, became an assistant principal or principal of a junior high school, and then was fortunate to come back to the school where I am right now as a middle school principal at Johnson Williams Middle School.
So for those who may not know, your mother is well known in a lot of literacy circles. She's Laura Robb. And you just mentioned that in your teaching career when you started, you were teaching English language arts. So it's like you were following a lot in your mother's footsteps. Was that ever overwhelming to you to try to live up to who you saw in your mother as an educator?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it probably was a little bit initially. One of the things that my mother told me was I needed to spend less time trying to be like her and more time to try to figure out who I was and what the path was for me to be, as a teacher. And one of the things that she showed me, I've learned a lot from that, is she was a mentor to me and helped me be successful. But it was never with a mindset of, hey, you need to be like me and I want you to teach like me. It was more just trying to open my understanding to what language arts instruction was and to work on finding my sea legs, so I could be, the English teacher that I was meant to be, but not to be necessarily the English teacher that she was. So I'm lucky in that regard. She's been a great teacher and a great coach.
I bet. I love your mother so much, and I love you too. But I love your mother is like one of the sweetest people on the planet.
Hey, I'm not going to argue that. I love her too.
Well, thinking about your career in education when you got started, what do you feel like was a lesson that you unexpectedly learned about yourself when you became a teacher?
When I became a teacher, I don't think this is unusual. I think a lot of people go through what I'm going to share right now. When I started, I thought it wasn't going to be that challenging. I thought that I was a reasonably smart guy. And in case, I have Laura Robb to help me out with my lesson planning, that I'd be able to kind of get my sea legs quickly and be able to figure out how it worked. But what I found was the first few years of teaching really put me in touch with my my personal vulnerabilities. And I started seeing very quickly where my strengths were and where my weaknesses were. And that was a little bit daunting. But what I find, and what I found now as I look back as a principal with people who come into the profession, is part of the journey of becoming an effective teacher is you need to learn the things that you're naturally good at, and you need to start understanding where your challenges and your weaknesses are, and you need to come to grips with that. So sometimes people who can't come to grips with that, the profession may not work out for them. But I think if you can, it has the potential to make you a lot stronger and help you better understand yourself, and then in turn better understand the kids that you're working with in the classroom.
So when did you realize that administration might be a good next step for you?
I was a team leader, and I was a department chair, and started really enjoying the opportunity to work with teachers and be able to share my ideas about curriculum, be able to provide support for teachers, be able to provide some direction for the department. And really through some encouraging from my mother, decided to go back to UVA and get my endorsement in administration. And it was a really challenging time for me, because then the classes were actually in Tyson's Corner, which is think about where Fairfax is, Washington, D.C., probably about 50 miles from where I live. And I had to take courses on Friday night and all day Saturday. So I went through about 2 years of leaving work on Friday and driving 50 miles and then going back home, and then going back on Saturday and going to classes the entire day on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So it was a grind and pushed me. There's no doubt about that.
Well, as educators, when we're teachers, there's a lot of doubt that we face off and on about, am I really meant for this? Is this the right job? The kids are eating at me. The administration's eating me. And what I found is when you move into an administrative role, sometimes those doubts get expanded upon it and just seem to consume so many of us. Do you find yourself ever battling those kind of insecurities and doubt?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. Yeah.
And how do you work through it where they don't eat you away?
I think, you got to learn how to compartmentalize, mm-hmm. and you need to learn how to get really good people around you and be able to rely on some supports from your team. And one of the things that I've learned that's helped me achieve some success over time is to make sure that I'm bringing really good people in on my team, especially within my administrative team, and people that have skill sets that I may not necessarily have.
Right.
And then this belief that everyone is better than anyone. Mm-hmm. And you need to work with a team and not feel that you need to shoulder everything on your own, not feel that you need to know every single answer. And I think one of the hard things about transitioning to administration from the classroom, and this may have been hard for you because you were not just a successful teacher, but you were one of the most successful teachers in the United States of America. And so, going from, being in the classroom to a school has parallels. There's no doubt about it. And I think you would not argue with me that many of the things that make a successful classroom make a successful school. But working with adults and lots of people that have different personalities, and different philosophies can sometimes be different than working with 10, 11, or 12-year-olds where you can kind of shape the process a little bit more. But I find that even though I've been in the business for 20 years, I probably have more questions now than I had when I was a lot younger than you are. And I know I think you're actually younger than my son, Todd. You've been incredibly successful and have come very, very far very quickly. And so it is always an honor to be able to connect with you and talk with you.
Well, thank you.
But they don't go away. I think that maybe if they do go away, that may be a bigger problem, because those feelings are indicative of you caring, or indicative of you really trying to be reflective, exactly. Indicative of you really trying to think out and make the best decisions for kids, which is a lot to shoulder in our job. There's no doubt about that.
Well, I think you're exactly right about making sure that you understand that you don't have to carry all the weight, no matter what your position is, and that all of us together, working together, is where we truly make change, and we figure out that, people are dealing with a lot of the similar things that we are, and when we share those, we can understand each other better. And, and diving into that a little bit, one thing that you and I both share in common is both of us have lost a parent while we were adults. Mm-hmm. And so talk to me a little bit about what impact that had on you.
Wow, that's a really, I have not been asked that one before. That That is very challenging. You know, one of the things that, you know, we all go through this when we're growing up. You know, we idolize our parents, and our parents are iconic to us, and they have all the answers to everything. And you know, in the case of me and my father, you know, my father had some illnesses, Parkinson's, dementia, and you know, I saw him become, in a lot of ways, in many ways actually, a lot less than what he was when he was at his prime. That's hard, you know, and it's part of life. You know, one of the things that I've learned in life as you grow older is, you know, life is not all great. You know, there's good times and there's bad times, but part of being a good son is to be supportive and to give that time to your mother, in my case, you know, and to my father, to help make sure that his final years were years of dignity, and years that he knew how much he was cared for, you know, and how much he was loved, you know. And I've seen you know, and you were very transparent with the journey that you went through with your mother. It was incredibly clear to me, and certainly to anyone who read anything that you posted or videos that you shared. The impact of your mother on your life was profound, you know? And I think the other thing that you learned, and you probably learned this too, is everything that we experience with our parents, you know, it doesn't go away. It stays, you know, and it stays in a different way. And although our parents may not over time be with us in a physical way, they're with us in other ways. And then they live on with the stories and that we share when we share with other people. So I appreciate you asking that question. And
well, you know, I think you just hit the nail on the head that, you know, I know that through my being open and vulnerable about this topic, I've met a lot of people dealing with different levels of grief, whether it is losing a loved one, whether it's losing a child, losing a parent. Each one of those levels of grief people take on differently. And, you know, your father has been gone about 7 years now, I think, if I did the math correctly. Do you find yourself cycling back into different stages of grief, or does it hit you randomly? Because I know one thing that I've found by talking about this is I'm glad we're able to talk about this, because I feel like people just try to sugarcoat it or be like, oh, you've had time to get over it, like you're totally good now. And I'm like, well, you know, yeah, for me, like it's been a year and a half, but there's still days that I'm like, I feel like it just happened 15 minutes ago. Do you find yourself in that same predicament sometimes?
Yeah, I find it that way all the time. Yeah, and you know, you don't. One of the things that I've learned is like you don't really get over it. You just kind of learn to live with it.
Right.
But you know, the thing that's interesting for me is my mother still lives in the house that I grew up in. So when I go to the house or I see pictures, you know, I have very vivid memories of you know, of events that family events that occurred in that house. And they're good, you know, and it's good to have those memories.
Yeah.
But at times, you know, it can be a little bit hard. It really can. But you know, I certainly haven't been one who wants to box those things up and kind of move onward. And you know, the odd thing is, and you know, you probably experienced this too, but sometimes at the oddest moments, you know, I have these interesting recollections of something with my father. That may go back from, you know, when I was a child. You know, in fact, I had a dream the other night about some fishing ventures that we went on when I was just a little kid, and it's good, you know. And I think sometimes after an emotional event, it's a little jarring to have those kind of recollections or those kind of dreams. But what I found is that as time moves on, it becomes comforting, and it's good, and it feels good.
You know, I think you're exactly right. You know, I think about when I first lost my mother, it was like I wanted to cut out so many things of my life that reminded me of her, whether that was a baseball game or a restaurant or a smell or things like that. And just like you said, you know, as time has progressed, there's little things like I was in the grocery store the other day and some lady walked by and I swear it was the same perfume my mom used to wear. And it brought back this memory of being kids and her getting ready for church. And it's like those little things. I'm like, oh, now I'm glad that just happened, because that's another positive memory that you get to hold on to and kind of keep them with you the whole time.
Yeah. And you know, and I've had those same kind of experiences with even going back to my grandparents. You know, and I'll share a really interesting story with your audience tonight. So my grandfather, you know, who was really part of the subject of my TEDx talk, had an incredible influence on me when I was a kid. And Todd, I think he died before you were born. He died in 1980. I
Yeah.
think before you were born.
Yeah.
So he was an immigrant, and he came to America as a self-made and became, really successful self-made man. But one of the things that he did was he used to like to buy like nice shoes, and because he was in the shoe business, so he took a lot of pride in having really nice shoes. And he used to buy these shoes from Switzerland from this company called Bally, Bally, and I think they're still alive.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to like his shoes and think about his shoes. So about 4 years ago, I was helping my mother clean out my father's closet, and I digging out in the very, very back of the closet, and there's a box of shoes. So I open up the shoes, and they are a pair of shoes from my grandfather that he actually gave to my father in 1973, which is way before you were born.
Wow.
And so like I open up the box, and they're in perfect condition. They're not cracked. They look like they just came, they were just purchased. And so I have them in my closet right now. And every once in a while I wear them. And, I don't walk around telling people, hey, I'm wearing these shoes that my grandfather got me, actually purchased in 1973 that in some way I feel were meant for me. But I know I feel they were meant for me. And that's a good feeling. And it's another one of those ways that you have a connection to a past from a long time ago, which is a really nice thing.
That is such a cool happenstance of events to and then have the shoes fit too. That's even awesome there alone.
Absolutely perfect. They do.
So Evan, when you look back on your entire life and think about the events that have played into the man you've become today, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of them that come to mind, but if you were to think of one person outside of your family who really played a role into growing you into the man you are today, who would one of those people be?
There's a lot of people, and that's really hard. Yeah. It's kind of hard to pick. I would say that I probably would say my wife, who, I met my wife, Todd, in the late 1980s, although we were married in the early 1990s. So I've known her for a long, long time. And so she knew me when I had no clue about what I wanted to do, and has known me, as I figured out what I've wanted to do, and actually had some, it felt good, about what I'm doing professionally. And it's good to have someone who supports you, and it's good to have someone who understands, the journey that you've gone through. And everyone needs someone who's a champion for them. Yep. And so she certainly served that role for me, as have other people. But I love that. Yeah.
Well, before I get into my last question, obviously I've got to ask about this new book called Team Makers that you wrote with your mom. I'm so jealous that you got to write a book with your mom. But talk to me about how this book came to be and what and who it's for, what it exists for.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Well, first of all, I've always looking for opportunities to write with my mother because she's a really, really good writing partner, and she lives around the block, which is particularly helpful. But we're always kind of brainstorming on ways and saying, okay, I'm a school principal, she's a literacy coach. What are some ways that we can kind of combine? And I can share things from an administrative perspective, and she can bring in the teacher literacy coach perspective. And so we were talking about it, and that kind of was the impetus for this book, which is really all about different ways to collaborate and build parallelism between the classroom and ultimately up through the central office. So the book is about thinking a little bit differently about things that we do, and finding ways to reflect and to collaborate different things, and come up with new ways that are hopefully more effective. One of the things, I talk about this a lot, and I know you certainly believe in it, is this concept that everything that we do in life is designed to give us exactly what we get. And so the book forces the reader to reflect on their as-is state, whether it's a classroom, a school, or a central office, and start reflecting on things that are working well, and start thinking about things that could be different, and then encourages the reader to try some things different in order to get a different outcome.
Well, I've been reading through the book and I absolutely love it. So thank you guys for putting that out there for us. Cause I think there's not a lot of books that I will like happily endorse and be like, oh my gosh, people should go check this out. But this is one of those that I'm like, I really believe in the messages that y'all share and kind of what you're trying to do. And I know that the people behind the message truly believe this with all their heart and are in it for the betterment of educators and kids and aren't just in it to get their name out there and make a buck. So I love that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, and I would say I have to kick that right back at you because kids deserve it. Sparks in the Dark, Stories from Web, every book that you have ever written, the passion that you have for kids and for education and for being a real champion for kids, it is so incredibly evident. It's also evident in your 2 TEDx talks. I don't know that I'll ever do 2, Todd.
I still can't believe I did 2, because let me tell you, that was by far the 2 most scariest experiences of my life.
Well, I remember when I did mine, I had asked you, I was like, why'd you do 2? And you had a really good answer for that, and I'll keep that between you and me. But yeah, your talks are inspiring, and you continue to inspire me through your writing, through your speaking, through the way that you are just a positive champion for change in kids and education. And man, I am like so appreciative and so grateful for the connection that we've established, and so excited, about what the future will hold and other opportunities that we can have to collaborate.
I love it. Well, Evan, the one question I always love to end my conversations on is, if there was one thing, it doesn't have to be in education, it can be anything, one thing that you wish more people knew or understood, what would your one thing be?
I would say the one thing would be is that anyone who is successful in life, whether they're an athlete, an actor, an educator, a speaker, I would want people to know that anyone who gets to that station in life works hard. And I think sometimes there's a presumption, and sometimes it comes through the media, that things come easy. Someone writes a book, or someone's like Todd Nesloney, who writes multiple books, gives TEDx talks, and speaks around the country, that it just kind of falls into your lap. And one of the things that I've learned, and it's a good thing, and I think it's a good thing to teach kids, is that to achieve success in life, you have to work hard. But to understand that that's good. That's a good thing. There's a discipline that you learn through working hard, and working hard will always improve you and potentially can help you achieve a place in life that you can be a positive influence for other people.
I love that. That is the perfect way to end. Evan, I admire you and your work so much. And when you agreed to come on, I was so excited. So thank you for not only coming on tonight, but also being really vulnerable and honest and sharing some pieces with me and the viewers tonight, our listeners. So thank you for just everything that you do.
Well, you asked some questions that I have not been asked before, but I'm completely comfortable with you certainly being the one asking those questions.
Thank you.
Man, I appreciate everything you do, Todd. You do some incredible work for educators all across the country and all across the world. So thank you for having me as a guest on the show.
Well, thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere you get your podcasts. And please, if you have a couple seconds today, go on iTunes and leave a review on any Tell Your Story episode, as that helps me so much getting some of these messages out there. I hope that you have been encouraged and inspired by tonight's conversation, and that in some form or fashion, it has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story, because like I say every week, every story matters. Have a great night, everyone.